Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Matthew Ryan, a prolific game designer and publisher. His company, Envy Born Games, has recently launched tiny game series on Kickstarter. Matthew, welcome to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is great having you on the binge. We first met at Origins. I got a chance to see your game, Sirens, which is really exciting. So I'm trying to get my camera up here at the same time. There you are. Now you're on screen. Sirens. My God, this was one of the coolest things I think I had ever seen. It was one of my highlights. I did the whole preview area of Origins. I got to see all the new things that were coming. This one caught my eye right away. And then when you pulled out the app and started playing the music, I'm like, dude, this is crazy. So we're going to get into that in a second. But before we get there, I want to start off by asking you, kind of where did this all begin? I know you've done a lot of like game design and licensing and some publishing and so forth, but can you take us back to kind of how you got into this in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lived in Vegas for 13 years and I was a bartender. And one day I just had the idea, like, I want to make something for myself or something. I want to create something. And I always liked games, video games, board games. And I thought, like, well, I have no idea how to make a video game. I was like, I think I might be able to figure out how to make a board game. So I started to go online and read, different Facebook group posts and different forums and kind of learn like that. And I figured, well, let me combine drinking, because I was a bartender, and board games into one game. And at first it was supposed to be like, oh, it'll also be educational. So a lot of like the trivia questions in the game are like alcohol related questions that, are kind of like, oh, I didn't know that about alcohol. But so then I made a drinking game called Don't Get Drunk. And that did well for my first campaign on Kickstarter. I was really happy with it. And conventions and stuff like that. And then basically went into and by conventions, I mean like Beer Fest, because that's where it does really well. From there, I went to like a local game store and was like, hey, would you carry my product? And then they actually asked me to help them with some publishing stuff. So then I got more into it. Had a pretty bad falling out with that previous company. Don't talk to them anymore. But now I'm doing it since I started my company for Don't Get Drunk. I was like, well, let me just focus on my company now. And so that's kind of how I got into making board games.
I had to do a double take on the logo because I thought originally it said Envy Board Games, but it's actually Born Games.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And that's just a play on our, again, I was in Las Vegas. It's a play on like the state motto.
Yeah. And I know you've kind of transitioned and kind of into non-drinking kind of games, right? And we're going to get into those in a second.
Yeah.
For people out there, because I mean, I get approached all the time with people that say, hey, I've got this great drinking game and it's a fun kind of party game. What is your advice to people out there? My understanding is those games, although it can do well, don't have as broad of appeal as, say, some of the other games at least in the hobby industry. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so they definitely don't do well in the hobby sector. In fact, when I was like making mine and asking questions, it felt almost like taboo when I would be in these groups asking questions. People were like, ew, get away from me. Like, party game, no.
Yeah.
But mine is even more with like the drinking element to it. But you got to know where you're at with it. Hobby industry is not going to do well. I think I'm on my 5th print run of Don't Get Drunk now. Wow. And it just sells on Amazon. Or like I said, I go to Beer Fest events and I get a booth and I get little tastes of beer all day and I sell my game, and it's a fun thing to do. But on Amazon, it does really well, and other like different social media channels. It went viral on like TikTok and stuff like that, because it has more of a casual audience. You know,
that's interesting.
So
often when I talk to people, I always say kind of know your audience, right? And this is a theme I've been playing over the past few episodes here on the podcast and talking to different guests. But my analogy would be we have a card game that is it's a hunting game. Right. So you're basically trying to like form sets and set collection, and it's basically themed around kind of hunting, kind of a 10-point buck. Right. And in theory, that should do really well. There's a ton of hunters across the states, here up here in Canada,
Yeah.
northern Ontario, northern Quebec, massive hunting community. Taking that to the hobby game conventions, like I've had conventions where we sell zero, like literally zero. Yet it does well on Amazon and does well, in certain pockets when we're selling it specifically in like the hunting areas, right? So it's kind of making just sure the game you have, not all games are going to do well in the hobby industry, but doesn't necessarily mean that that they're not going to do well somewhere else. It's making sure you're just tailoring your audience to the actual game that you made, right?
100%. I've taken Don't Get Drunk to, like, I took some to Origins and no one cared, obviously. But again, it sells well at beer fest events
Yeah.
or online. So party games and stuff like that, there's still a market for it. You just need to be in the right area. And it depends how much of a party game it is. It could still do good in the hobby sector too. I mean, we definitely have some successful party games.
Yeah.
It's just there's a fine line there. There's definitely a fine line there. But there's always life on Amazon.
Exactly. So as you kind of position to these other types of games, what got you thinking about doing kind of like this tiny box series and getting into these definitely not drinking games? Like these couldn't be further from that, right? So what kind of led you in that particular direction?
Yeah, so I started getting more into industry and was like, I don't think my liver can handle making another drinking game. So no, I was just like, I wanted to start to transition and focus this way with more of the hobby style, just because I got more involved with it. But the idea behind the tiny game series, because I do have two rather larger board games in the works,
Yeah.
but as you know, these take years to develop and get ready. The idea behind the tiny game series was to kind of get some brand awareness, build a rapport with the board game community, showing I can make quality products, quality games in a small box format. And this way, when I present something larger, they already trust my company, or like, oh, he's fulfilled 3 campaigns now. So that was kind of the thought.
Hmm.
And because I can do those a little bit faster, I can stay active in the board game community as well, like in all the forums and stuff where I'm sharing a bunch of different stuff, except for instead of just like, it takes me 3 years. I'm just talking about this one thing for 3 years kind of thing, which, there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's just like my strategy behind it was like, I want to stay active and build brand awareness and rapport with the industry, basically.
Yeah, certainly if the position is as a publisher versus just kind of a straight up designer, right? That's a very different path
Yeah. Oh,
to,
yeah.
to take in the industry, and staying active is a smart move. Certainly, even as you'll have stock, right? So once this campaign's done, you go and you produce your stock. You'll have, I'm sure, many extra copies just based on
Yeah.
minimum runs. But then those act as great add-ons when you do these larger games, right? You can say, oh, for
Yep.
another $15, you can add this game and this game and this game on. So I think that's pretty cool. This idea for sirens, where that I'm going to start with sirens just because that's the one that's got my
All
chest, right? So where the idea for sirens come?
So Sirens, my friend is the designer of it. I mostly publish now, but I develop like everything. I have my hands in everything, but I would never, I don't really design much more. So my friend did it, Art Casey. I actually worked on Mind Your Business with him, which was the game before this that we launched. And he showed me the game, and he added this music element to it as well. And I don't know who mentioned the idea of it, but it was like, what if we could play the music? And he's like, well, I have a friend who's a composer and can make music. And I always liked Greek mythology as well. So when he showed me the original like prototypes, I'm like, I think there's something here special that we can like work on and get to a point where it'll be really cool. So it's kind of how it started. And now I'm really happy where the app is working very well now compared to when I had it at Origins.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe describe for people kind of how this game works, and then how this app kind of interacts with the game, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So Sirens is a 1 to 2 player Greek mythology themed game. It has a musical element to it where every card has some sheet music on it. And what's happening is you're taking on the role of a siren, and you're trying to lure sailors to your side of the cove. And the way that you do that is through card drafting. There's going to be 2 rounds of card drafting, and then you're going to build out your cards in a tableau in front of you. There's different reasons how they score. There's 4 main things basically on a card that scores, but the thing that keeps the game fresh is before every game you pull out a card. It's called the universal rule card. and there's 11 different ones. So it changes up why you're drafting the cards each time you have a game. But then when you're done, you can take your cards and take a picture of it. And the app that I have developed will play back the song that you actually created with your cards. So
That's
that's
super
how it
cool.
works.
And then it doesn't matter the order, right? Like it'll just change the song up, right?
Yes, I mean some songs sound better than others, that's for sure. It's not we're not Beethoven over here making magic, but it's really cool. I call it the chef's kiss or the cherry on top for Sirens. I mean, it's the game itself is very good for what we've did for such a small box. And then this is completely optional, but we thought it was like a really unique and fun thing for people to enjoy.
Well, I thought was also pretty cool about the way you guys did that app was when you scan the music, right? And
Yeah.
if your phone doesn't scan it properly, because this is going through my head, well, what happens if it doesn't scan and then it won't be able
Yep.
to play? But you got this kind of clever thing you guys did to say, okay, well, if for some reason it can't pick up the card, you can then go through the menu and pick out your specific card and insert
Yep.
it into the sequence, right? So you can hear your
Yeah.
song and maybe do a little victory dance with your song at the end or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's a glare or cameras are different.
Yeah.
The app's not perfect. It's still becoming better each day, but sometimes it adds a card so you can just delete it. There's a little button to delete cards. And like you were saying, there's a little button where we can add cards and then you
Yep.
can just drag it to where you need it in your song.
How did you create this app? Did you hire like a company or you guys program it yourselves or?
I hired a company. I did not know how to develop an app. It actually was like, I thought it would be a lot more straightforward and a quicker process, but I've been working with that team that's been developing this app for, I don't know, at least 6 months at this point. I was like, this is what I want, make it happen. And then it's just like, well, we do this, 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 this. It's been quite the process.
Originally, I was thinking this thing was actually reading the notes, but it's probably more likely that you've got a certain segment of music assigned to each card. And it's just
Yeah.
basically saying, okay, this
We
is
wanted it to read each note. There's apps out there that can do it. I actually reached out to them about licensing. They wanted an obscene amount of money for the license.
Yeah.
And we were trying to create that of an app where it would read the actual sheet music. But it was much, much more expensive and much, much more difficult for developers to actually get it going. So the one I'm working with was supposed to be that way, and it just was not functioning. So we're like, all right, let's pivot. And now basically it recognizes every card, and every card has an audio associated with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's elegant. And if it gets you the same result, then why not, right? So the next you had in your small box series is a game called Defrag. So what is this game all about?
So Defrag is a 1 to 2 player spatial awareness puzzle game. There's a level of like hand management, but you're basically trying to. It has a Windows 95, like a real nostalgic theme. The box itself is a floppy disk. The designer, Brandon McCool, it was his idea, and I was like, I love this. I love the idea. I think people will just buy the box just to have a floppy disk box, regardless, even if they play the game.
Yep.
But in the game, there's 4 main file types basically spread out in a grid, and you're trying to move them onto each other to stack the same file types. So you're trying to consolidate all these little bits of different files into stacks so you can score them. So the base game is basically trying to beat your high score, but then the game itself has a scenario manual with 40 different objectives in it. And as you work your way through the objective manual, there's different like setups or different challenges to overcome. Some are harder than others. And that's what I really liked about Defrag a lot. It reminded me of like The Crew a bit, where you're working your way through different, missions.
Mm-hmm.
So I really liked that element to this. And that's Defrag.
And who's the designer of this one?
Brandon McCool.
Graham McCool as well.
Yeah.
And then your third game that you've added to this series is the 16 Candies.
Yes.
So it's definitely got a bit of a Candy Crush vibe to it. Can you talk to us about 16 Candies and kind of what that's about and how you play it?
Yeah, so 16 Candies is a light set collection, family-friendly game. And basically you're drafting cards to try and collect the same amount of a certain candy type. The cards they're like double-sided where you can rotate them in your hand so you have a different candy type.
Mm-hmm.
And basically we encourage people to play with real candy. So you have a health pool of 16, which we have little bits that you can use, or you play with real candy, and then as the game's being played and you lose hands, you have to eat your health pool. So the idea was to create a fun experience for like kids to play with parents or family settings, something fun like that. So when you're losing, you don't feel bad about it because you're getting to eat some sweet candies and stuff like that. But it definitely hits on a different demographic. And I think they all kind of do. And that was kind of the idea behind it as well when we decided on the 3 games to put into the series.
Who does the graphic design? I really dig the graphic design on this game.
I have, so I worked with different illustrators and graphic designers on all of them, and some are a combination. So on 16 Candies specifically, I can't pronounce her last name, so I'm not gonna even try. But her name's Katarzyna, and she's lives in Poland, and she actually did the illustration and graphic design for 16 Candies, which and we worked really well together. We're actually working on some other stuff together. We're actually doing, so the 3 game set has a box sleeve that holds all 3 nicely.
Here. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and that's not finished. What's on the Kickstarter right now, but she's using all of the art and elements from different games, the 3 games, to create one collective image where they're all doing stuff together. So I'm working with her on that now as well.
Yeah, it's cool. And so that you get that sleeve if you get all 3 games is essentially the idea, right?
Yeah, the bundle offer. It's going to be a Kickstarter exclusive.
Yeah. So with this campaign, and first of all, congratulations, because I believe you're already funded on this too, right? I think.
Yep. We funded day 1, which was nice.
Yeah, you're double your funding goal. You over 619 backers, still 19 days to go. I mean, so the sky's the limit to where this thing could land. This whole idea of creating 3 games in one as a campaign. Selfishly, I'm interested because I'm working on something down the road with a bunch of small box games we have as well. So talk to me a little bit about the decision process and kind of the trials and tribulations of kind of having 3 games in one campaign.
Yeah, so it's pretty difficult because they have such different themes, to pull it all together was kind of difficult. And I think we did a really good job of that with the video, which I work with a Nero. I don't know if George knows a lot of people in the industry, but he's the owner of a Nero. He's a good friend of mine. But we came up with the idea of how can we tie three such extremely different themes together. And with the video, we kind of had it where a floppy disk goes into a computer, and then you click on the icon for sirens, and then we show you sirens on the table with like music thematic to, Greek mythology. So I think we did a good job of finding a way to combine them all together. And then for the Kickstarter page itself, each section kind of is thematic to its own as well. Sirens has, follows its own color code and stuff like that. But I looked at previous, I'm a strong believer of like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
If success has been had, look to that. So I looked at a lot of other projects and kind of was like, ooh, that looks like it worked really well or it didn't. And through research, kind of made decisions through that on how we should structure the page and things like that. So that I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It's interesting. And then with the production, because you're gonna have minimums, are you able to like combine the production of these games? Like, can they go all on kind of the same run? Or are you looking at, because typically it's like it could be anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 copies minimum runs per game. But if they can they gang them all together where it ends up being like 500 per game, or like how does that work for you?
Yeah. So I mean, I work with a few different manufacturers. The one I'm working with on here has minimum print runs of 1,000.
Yeah.
So at the very least, I'll be doing 1,000 of each game, in that sense. But you could do more or less of certain ones because I've printed other things with them as well, where I'm like, I need 1,500 of this and only 500 of that. And they want your business. And if you're a client, they're going to work with you on stuff. So I know I'm ordering more than the bare minimum for these games just because attending conventions throughout the year, showing off the prototypes for all 3 games. Mm-hmm. People are like, I want to buy these now. And I'm like, it's my prototype. I can't sell it to you. So I know that after the Kickstarter, these are going to do really well also. And I'm hoping they help me bust into retail because that's been a thing I've really been trying to get into. And I think they're at a price point and a size that is approachable for a lot of retailers. So I'm hoping this helps me to get in there. And then again, the idea is to continue on the series. So I have 3 other games not picked out yet. I have one that I've signed for the next series, and then 2 other that I'm considering right now. So the
So we
idea
do
is
like a larger
longevity
sleeve,
here.
like a 6-game sleeve then, or
I don't know if I'll do a 6 game sleeve. I'll probably do another sleeve unique to it.
yeah,
But yeah, it's the games are all numbered. So I have game 1, 2, 3, and then on the spines, so hopefully on campaign 2, when people see why does it say game 4, 5, and 6? What's game 1, 2, and 3? And then they're like,
yeah.
oh, sirens. Let me buy sirens. So
And then when you're mapping out the sales of this, because it's virtually impossible to have equal number, right? So
right.
have you kind of put some thoughts into that on how you're going to manage that inventory? Because you might like, what if you sell out a 1 game, but you've got the other 2? Like, how are you going to work that?
Yeah, so if I mean, just from looking at the campaign, you can kind of see 1 game's being a fan favorite right now.
Yeah.
So might go a little bit heavier on the order for that one. But as I do a lot of my own fulfillment. I have my
Mm.
stock in like a storage unit that I use, and I do
Yep.
all my own US fulfillment. So I'm very hands-on with my stuff. So if I see that stuff's getting low, I just put in the files are ready. So it's like, hey, manufacturers, let's do another 2,000 or 1,000 or whatever it might be. And I also arrange my own ocean freight. So like I'm very hands-on with everything that I do.
Yeah.
And I know that people work with fulfillment centers and different consolidators and stuff like that, which is completely good. It's just for me right now, this works. If I become some massive company, maybe I can't do it out of my garage anymore. Like I'll have to start partnering with some other people on it. But yeah, if something's starting to get low, just order more.
Certainly, the deeper you can go into learning the process, the higher your margins are, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And same thing in Canada. I do my own domestic fulfillment. I mean, it's not
We
rocket
should
science,
swap.
right?
You do fulfillment for me in Canada. I'll do US fulfillment for you on your
There we
next
go.
project. Let's go.
But it's really not hard, right? You're slapping a label in a box. You're packing it in a
Yeah.
box. You spend one afternoon. You just grind through it, and
Yep.
I mean, the savings are significant, right? So
Huge.
yeah,
Huge.
it's crazy.
You have a pizza party, some beer for your buddies, and it's like, come on, let's get this done.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I noticed also you're using Gel Up on your page as your kind of marketing partner. Can you talk a little bit about how the Gel Up relationship works? I know that they've recently partnered with Kickstarter itself, and Kickstarter is often encouraging people to use their partners versus, say, like a Backer Kit or some of these other
Right.
partners out there. The decision to use Gel Up, what was that decision like? And can you just walk us a little bit through how that relationship works?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot here. Because I like to test different things and work with different marketing companies. I will
Sure.
say this: the main marketing company I've been working with on this project is Dina Said So Studios, and they did a fantastic job. A lot of the pre-work up to it,
Yep.
and Gel Up was just, hey, when you're live, we're going to run some ads for you.
Yeah.
But I reached out to them because I've heard them. I've seen them do really well with certain projects. I've never worked with them, so I wanted to give them a shot. This particular project, it didn't have a great first day with the gel up numbers and all that, because in the back end they give you a dashboard. You can see where your ROAS is, your return, how much money you're making per ad spend. And we weren't hitting the numbers that we needed. So, and I think each project's unique, and it's tough when something has such a small MSRP or price point versus a game that's $100. So it's harder to hit that ROAS with your marketing spend, in my opinion. And I actually turned off my gel op spend after the first day and a half. I was like,
wow.
let's stop this. Yeah. So not to say that they're a bad company or anything like that, because they're not. It's just whatever the assets I provided them and whatever marketing creatives that happened just weren't able to convert how we needed to on this specific project. So I was like, it doesn't make sense at this point, because it was losing money. I was like, we have to stop it. So I'm currently trying some new stuff.
Yeah. Do you do some of your own like meta ads and things like that, or?
Yeah, so Dina Setso Studio helped me with a lot of my Facebook ads as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we just basically running stuff that they've helped me with and do that. But I have found a new program that I'll probably dive into this week and add some new creatives and try some different ads on top of what's already running, and see how that goes. But yeah, marketing is, I think, the biggest challenge for almost everyone,
Yeah.
And I'm always trying new stuff, and I always work with different marketing firms too, just to see where I just like to see what everyone can do and see how it can go. And there's a lot of good ones out there that I've worked with previously that I'd be happy to work with again. So
Two hardest things in this industry are building an audience
yep.
and the marketing for your campaign, right? Like people are like, oh, game design and gosh, the manufacturing. I'm like, that's the easy stuff, guys.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
the easy stuff. Building an audience and marketing. Those are the.
I try and tell people they're like, oh, you're in the board game industry. I'm like, no, I'm in the marketing business.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for pretty much anything. Like you could have the best board game ever, but if no one knows about it, it's not going anywhere,
Yeah.
So you really have to get that marketing done. There's a lot of great resources out there that are free to read up on, but even with that, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I always encourage people to look at it like a business, right? So if you're in it just for the design, which I think that's how most of us got started, right? We had a game that we designed ourselves and we wanted to share that with other people. But if you're not pitching, if you're not doing just one title, right, or pitching your designs to other people, and you're looking at doing multiple campaigns and making literally like a publishing, being a publisher,
yeah,
you got to treat it like a business, right? And that mind frame really changes, right, on how you approach a lot of things. Like you just talked about, right? Yeah, I could keep going with this marketing group, but I'm looking at my return on ad spend is not playing out. I got to flick a switch here. I got to turn it off, right? I got to switch gears and try something else. And you're constantly at the controls trying to figure out, okay, how can I keep this ship going, right? And maximize how it's going to pay out at the end.
Able to pivot.
And simple things, even like minimums and things like that. I've had, people who have launched their first game and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do 1,500 copies. And I'm like, okay, but you got like 100 backers. Like go to your manufacturer or change your manufacturers and find a manufacturer to do a 500 unit run. Get that out the door, take it as a learning, and then work on the next thing. But sitting on thousands of copies of games isn't helping you either, because that's cash flow that you've just tied up.
Yeah, I've made that mistake game, right? with Don't Get Drunk, where we're like, well, let's order 5,000 units because it saves us 20 cents a unit or something, But then at the time, it was inventory as fast as we should have been to order that many units, and then we were just like, well, our garages are full for a while. Like we got to find a way to move these. But I've done it too with previous publishers where something was ordered and then it just didn't really sell well outside of the kicks. Oof. Well, what are we going to do with these units?
Yeah, you're starting. Right?
But yeah, I'm fairly confident with the tiny games because, again, just the price point, how tiny games are hot right now, and just the response I've gotten at all the conventions where I will likely order more than needed, but I'm very confident that they'll be able to move. But if I wasn't, I would probably be very careful about the quantities that I'm getting made.
Oh, for sure. And it's a cool looking campaign. And congrats on that.
Thank you.
It looks awesome. And again, I got excited when I saw it at Origins and I'm like, oh, I got to talk to him about this, man. Thank God he's finally launched. I want to get him on the podcast.
Yeah.
So where do you go from here? Like, so you've done kind of these drinking type games. Now you're doing a tiny box game. You kind of teased us a bit that you have these larger games you're working on. Can you talk a little bit about what's coming next?
Yeah, for sure. So the next one that I'm working on is called Kalahari, and it's a Meerkat area control game. I was showing it at Gen Con a bit, got a great reception, and I'm actually working, a lot of people probably know Ammon Anderson. He did Gnome Hollow, we had like 15 publishers fighting over it. Yeah. He's helping me on Kalahari now, so I'm really excited to be working with him on it. The designer of this one is also Art Casey from my Sirens. And the artist is actually Gabby. We didn't bring her up, but she's the artist from Mind Your Business, Sirens, and now she's doing the Kalahari art as well. So, when you find a team that you work well with, you keep working with them.
Oh, yeah.
So Kalahari is going to be the next one. I am working on the next Tiny Game series. I've signed one for that already, and have a few other I'm looking at. And it's getting to the point where I see so many good games. I'm like, I might try a direct retail with one tiny game just to see how I can do it, because I've only ever launched on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But I'm getting comfortable with Amazon and all the conventions I'm going. I think I could do a direct retail launch. Nice. So I might try that. And then I have a super secret game that I worked on for like 3 years, and it got shelved for a while because of some legal issues. And it looks like those are going to be resolved, hopeful. And if I get the rights back to that, it's going to blow the industry away. And I cannot wait to share more about that. But I'm waiting to see what happens we have a contract out right now, so we'll see what happens with that.
Oh man, well that's ready. Let's get you back on the podcast. Let's talk about it. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm going to be everywhere showing that when it's ready.
Well, Matthew, I want to wish you all the best on this campaign. I mean, gosh, it's great to see that this thing's already double funded, and I can just imagine where it's going to end up. I'm super excited about it. I got stoked, and I think you're going to be very happy where this whole campaign ends off.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me too. I really appreciate it.
No worries,
always happy to talk about games.
All right, all the best. You take care. Cheers.
All right, say it.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.